Hi, my name is Chrissy Hammonds. I am an artistic advisor with Joico. I brought you here today so that I can demonstrate this color placement, which I actually got my inspiration from a painting that I did recently of a sunset. First, I want to talk about the cut. I did plan this cut out a couple of years ago, so I'm really excited that I finally got to do it and got to develop a color placement to correspond with my haircut. So starting first with my cut, I actually sectioned out a few, well, you can see whenever you see the hair color, because I really wanted to accentuate this longer section here in the front. And then also I've got this little hidden area here in the back. And this more so that we can pull everything forward. It's really important that you do the haircut first so that you can place the color based on the cut. And then I also sectioned here in the front. Later, after we talk about the cut, I'll talk about the color placement and why. It's really important that whenever you're placing your color, you're not only thinking of what that color looks like up here, but also how it's going to affect in the links in front. I'm trying to find my sectioning here. Right there, I see it. And I know on these the color may be considered a little more wild, but you definitely can incorporate the same kind of cut and color placement with blondes or brunettes, or even if you just want to stay in the red family. The inspiration from this color I actually got from a sunset, which I actually painted too. You can see that if you want. First, you want to, after you section out your longer pieces where you want to place your color, you want to make sure that you also separate the front from the back so that I don't remove too much of that length in the front. Do you guys have any questions? Because it helps when you have questions. Okay.
How did you decide which colors to place where?
That we'll talk about here in a second, but it all has to do with where it's going to blend into the next color. It's what we call color blending, and that's really done more at the end. So we cut, we color, and then we cut again, so that we blend the colors together. So I'm going to start in this back section. And this was all pre-cut, but I am going to follow along so you guys can see. Whenever you're layering hair, you want to place the comb directly at the scalp, put your fingers directly behind, and then pull out so that you're going to get the actual curvature from the head shape. Whenever you are doing this actual haircut, what I prefer to do and what is best is to stand directly behind the client, but for demonstration purposes, it's best that I stand to the side a little so that you guys can see what I'm doing. But you want to stand directly behind. Hold your hands in the position that feels most comfortable for you. Some like to pull up, or that's fine if that's what you're used to doing. I actually tend to just place my elbow directly at my hips, pull the hair out, and then I cut this way. I'm actually going to create a stationary guide at this point. So what that means is I'm going to keep my guide here in the center, and I'm going to move towards the sides using pie shaping and pulling everything to that point. What that's going to do is it's going to establish a little fullness and length towards the front. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you starting in the top versus the nape?
I'm starting in the top versus the nape. Just really, you can do the opposite. I just feel that whenever I was starting this cut originally, I wanted to preserve some of the length and fullness here, because I actually, whenever I finished this cut, there was quite a bit more length here, and then at the end I went back and removed some of that off. But like if I was going to do the same type haircut, but I wanted maybe more of the fullness towards the top, which would be ideal for someone that has really fine limp hair, then maybe I would start here and then just work up. And that's going to help to bring this in a little tighter and push the fullness up top. Where she's got, her hair is actually pretty medium textured, but she's got quite a bit of it, so I want to just really balance it out. That answer your question? Okay, good. So you can see, let me stand here so that you guys can see. I'm taking sections slightly on a pie shaping, and I'm going to pull this forward, and you can see where my stationary guide is here, and I'm just barely nipping that. And then I throw this at her because I'm sure she deserves it. So you can see I already have pretty clean lines, but I'm just, you know, touching it up for you. I'm just going to demonstrate half this haircut because I did the exact same thing on the other side. Now once I start getting towards the side section where it starts going into the front, I am going to change my direction in which I cut. I'm still going to follow the same the pie shapings going towards the face, but to preserve some length towards the front, I'm actually going to continue to use this top as my guide. Bring this up over my hands, and then by doing that, it's going to be shorter here and a little longer here, and I'm just going to remove and do some dusting on that. Sound good? Thanks. Let me stand on this side if you guys can still see me, so at least you can follow along. You can start to see where I'm starting to get into my colored section, but I still am wanting, I really want these longer pieces here, so I'm leaving that in the clips. Slightly over directing these sections back. I can remove this now because I'm working towards the front. You can really see a lot of that color exposed. So I am going to move towards the front because I want to show a little fringe. I'm going to create just a tiny bit of fringe. I did place the color so that there wasn't a strong fringe. If I were to have one, I would want to maybe place my color more horizontally here, but because of that, I'm just going to do a slight little taper so she can still put her hair up in a ponytail for work or chasing around kids or whatever she chooses to do. So anytime that you want to push the hair in one direction, you want to over direct the opposite direction. So I'm taking a small section to begin with, over direct, and I'm going to remove. I'm going to check that length and see if I like it. Sounds good. Take the next section, over direct, which is going to help to layer and soften.
Now, why do you hold it up like that?
Just because what it's going to do, over directing is going to create a little shorter here than here. So it's going to push the hair down and over. So I'm going to over direct, bring over this side, which, you know, I over directed the side. You could see where I previously cut. I'm just going to kind of match that. And then when it drops, it'll softly, you see how it starts to bend. Yeah, softly there. I want to taper this in slightly. Okay, so before I get into the actual color placement, and just to clarify, I'm not going to be using actual color today because it was already done yesterday. I am going to be using conditioner just to do a mock so you can tell how I place my color and why. I do want to show you before what we call color blending. And I softened some of the line here, but I did leave some so that you guys can see, and also on the opposite side. So in comparison, you can see here that this is much softer of a line versus here. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. First, you want to pick up the section that you're wanting to blend. And I usually start with just chipping into it. And that helps us soften. And then once it lays, if I see anything else, like maybe right in this section, I may go directly vertically. You don't want to go horizontally because you're going to remove chunks out of the hair. So just going to go in with my shears vertically and just barely chip into it. So you can see that's really blend those two, or married those two colors together. And then this other side I actually have not done at all, so you'll get to see a lot more. It kind of has a little bit of a feathering effect. Actually, let me tell you what I'm looking to blend first. For one, I want to expose a little bit more color on this side, so I'm going to need to remove some of the base color here, and then I'll soften this line in here. I'm going to work towards the top and then work down. Doing a little slide cutting into it. You can see how that's already exposing a little more color there. I like to just use my shear because you can actually lift and see what you're needing to remove. Just a little more here. I am really excited about talking about the color when we get into it. Because one of the best things that I learned with being with Joico is how important it is to have a haircut and a color that go together. So you're not just blindly putting in highlights. I think too often people just do the same pattern, you know, what they call it, the mohawk, across the top and then down the sides, where you really should be doing a separate color placement for each haircut because you're doing the color placement for each haircut. Right? You agree?
I agree.
She says I concur. That's what she said. I'll chip into this just a little bit. All right, that looks much better already. So next I'm going to talk about the color, which we use Vero K-Pak color. She came in originally with level 6 in areas and level 5 in areas previous color. She had an inch of new growth. She had a little bit of what I call natural highlights, but it's gray, sorry. A little glitter. But she had some warmth to her hair, and I wanted to still kind of go with that warmth because I knew that I wanted to put lots of warm and cool tones in the hair. So her base color, after I addressed the natural highlights, or the gray, I used Age Defy, I based her with V4, and there's someone looking in the window, so that happens. I'm a little ADD, so. I based her with equal parts V4 and N4. And then I also pre-lightened her with, well, I actually used Active Lip with 10 volume, but that's another story. And I lifted her to a nice pale yellow, which is a level 9, and in some areas she lifted to an 8, which was fine because I knew that I wanted to just stay pretty dark in these areas. Thank you, friend. And then after that, I used our semi-permanent hair color. So it's a deposit-only color. You do not have to mix this with the developer. And I chose to use 5 formulas within this one panel. I know that kind of sounds crazy, but I did start originally with one weave, and I used the yellow with a tiny bit of orange in it because, like I said, I lifted some of it to a level 9, but not all of it. So instead of trying to fight with the pre-existing color, then I just went with it and just added a little orange to it. I did one weave of that, then I went into direct orange. Now the reason that I chose to weave my first section is more because I was thinking of the effect at the end. So I wanted to make sure that not only did it have a nice blending and softening effect from starting off, but also that it's going to help to blend into my next color, which was the orange. So I weave this section. Another thing that we like to do with Joico that I love and I think is genius is we use colored foils that correspond with the color that we're using. For one reason, it looks really cool, but the main reason is that it helps us to keep track of what color we're doing next. Like I said, this is conditioner, it's not color. You want to apply about a ½ inch away. Turn your brush vertical and kind of work back towards the scalp, and that helps to eliminate any bleeding. So that definitely can work with lightener also. Whenever you're applying the product, you want to do a little bit of a zigzag, and what that's going to do is help to roll the hair so that you're getting color on both sides. You're welcome. So earlier I had the question, how do you know where to place the color next? So the way to answer that is it all depends on the haircut and how you want that color to look. I knew that I wanted a punch of yellow towards the top, but I didn't want it to dominate the rest of it. I want to definitely make sure that I expose a lot more blue. So before I place the color, I look at that section and I think, okay, if I apply this here, this is going to lay about here, and then I can start to go into my pinks and violets. And then also, this is a good little tip too, using your hand as a guide will show you how much that color is going to be exposed underneath that. So this is really great for the top, where you think like, where do I start? You know, well, that depends. That depends if you want the majority of it to be base color or if you want the majority of it to be yellow. So I place my hand here and I see like, okay, that's a good area. I've got enough base color, but I'm going to see quite a bit of that yellow through the top. Good?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be charging you guys after. It's $50 per tip. So I'm moving into my next section, which is the orange. Apply the product, work it up towards the scalp. Make sure that you have all that hair in there. So next I'm going into my magenta, which is here. I used this color direct. I did not mix the next one with anything. Let me see where that stops. I did one slice of magenta. I have some orange in that, yes, I know. Whenever you're doing slices, you want to make sure that it is thick enough that you're going to be able to see a color change, but also thin enough that you could read a newspaper through it. Anything thicker than that, you're probably going to not have proper saturation. So with this next section, I mix magenta, which we have here, with a little of the sapphire blue, just to get a little violet-y, so that I could slowly start transitioning into the blue. And then also what I did, instead of taking a direct slice, I just immediately weaved. Same as the beginning, it just helps to give me a nice transition into that blue. So I think one of the biggest differences that I've learned with being with Joico is just really thinking about what you're doing before you do it. Because I'm thinking about what that's going to look like in the end, and not so much, oh, this is going to be pretty, I'm going to put this color here, I hope it looks good. No, I know for a fact whenever I get my foils in and I'm applying the color, that it's going to do exactly what I want. And that's one of the reasons it's great to start from the top and then move down, is because if you start from the bottom and move up, you're going in there blind and you don't know where you're going to end up. I did 2 weaves here of the violet. For all of you out there, if we don't make it through this storm, there's a chance we may get blown away from a tornado. These are the sacrifices that I make. So as I'm working into the blue took me just a little while to figure out. I knew exactly what blue I wanted, but I had to mix it properly. So what I ended up doing is using the sapphire blue, 75% of my formula, 25% I used the peacock green, because I really wanted that deep, dark, kind of more midnight blue. I'm sure they're laughing when they watch this. Before I actually did the color placement, I used the hair repair system, because it helps to get the hair in optimum position so that it's going to be able to accept the hair color. Because if you have any porosity issues, you're going to have spotting in your color and you're going to have to redo it. So what I did, I shampooed her with the Color Therapy shampoo, and then I applied cuticle sealer for 5 minutes. I rinsed, and then I applied the deep penetrating reconstructor for 5 minutes. After that, I took her back, I finished her haircut, and dried her, and then started her color placement. After I was finished with the color placement, I did cuticle sealer again, and then I used the Intense Hydrator for 5 minutes. You'll notice that all of my color is really just towards the front, because I designed my haircut so that all of the attention would go towards the front. It really doesn't make any sense to put any of the color in the back, or the eye will be kind of confused on where to look. Sound good? Thanks. I know I'm genius, thanks. Just hold that right there for me, thanks. That's great. So This takes care of just the top section. That really was it. There isn't that many foils, but when you see it all down, it looks like it's a very impactful and it takes a long time. It really doesn't take that long for color. Trying to find my next section here. Here it is. Before I did start haircut though, I asked her which side do you like to section your hair on or part your hair on, and because I don't want to go against what she naturally does. On this section, I skipped the yellow and the orange and went directly into the magenta. I just didn't want that much impact in the interior. I felt like because I'm putting so much yellow on the top that it would get lost, and I really want to keep this through here a little more deep and subdued going into my violet. I did put another yellow in there, which I'll show you here in a second. As for the long pieces, right in this section, and that's because I wanted one little punch of color there. It really, I mean, once you get the cut in, it all is up to you on how you want that color to look. I mean, as long as you really think it out in advance, which I guess I'm going kind of more off experience, because there's been several times that you just, you know, you have that color formula and you just go in that pattern and you follow the pattern and you follow the pattern, and then it's just, you kind of look at that and you get a little confused. It's when the colors just all kind of blend together. So I just knew that, I don't know, I've kind of been thinking about this color for a while, so I knew what route I was going. It's kind of hard to answer that, I think. So into my blue. And really, the point of this section is because I stopped here, and instead of continuing that, I could have continued this color down and just wrapped it around. But I didn't need to. So I just chose to put a little color here, and what this is going to do is blend into these long pieces, which I'm getting into that now. So remember, with the haircut, I sectioned out little areas. Let me get it. There we go. Now I see it. I did one thin slice of yellow, so that whenever her hair lays, it's just gonna, I'm just mainly gonna see that kind of kicking out here in the front. All right, I'll keep you. I'm just going to place the foils on this one side. I mean, I'll explain what I did on the other side, but I pretty much did the same on the other side. Okay. Sounds good. Glad you guys are still with me. So I skipped the orange and I went directly into the magenta. Why? Because I wanted the focus to be more on the violet and the blue, as opposed to, I like the strong impact of the colors on top here, but I didn't want that in the bottom. Did violet, and then into my blue. Did really fine slices through this area. I personally, after that, I left base color right at the last section as base color, which I'll show you. I prefer to do that. For one, I feel like that it makes the color pop a little more whenever you have these colors on top of base color. Also, because these semi-permanents are so pigmented, I feel like if you have too much close to the skin, it tends to bleed onto the skin. So it kind of leaves a little bit of a comfort blanket in a sense, which you can see. I just left a tiny bit of base color so that doesn't lay directly on her face. You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
She did have to go to a baseball park yesterday. Is that what you did?
Yes.
Something?
Yeah.
And so it rained last night and I'm a little nervous, but thankfully none of the color bled together and there was no staining on her skin or anything. So that made me happy. So that's this section. What? Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, for sure. So this is the front section, but as you remember whenever I was sectioning out the haircut originally, I also, can I have you tilt over slightly? Can you remove your head and just, yeah, thanks. I also left the section here so it would kick towards the front. Did a very similar color placement here, but I did not use any of my yellow or my orange in this section. Let me part it out. There it is. Jared's not paying any attention to me, so rude. So I started with my magenta. You're fired. Get out. Security. Just kidding. So are you guys learning something at least? Maybe?
Yes.
Some?
I love how you did the top.
Thanks. She said I should get promoted. Oh my God. You guys can't see it right now, but there is some really strange little girl crawling on the floor. She did not take her medication today, unfortunately. So when I'm working in this section, I want you to see that there is this previous, because whenever I sectioned it out, I had a tiny point here in the center, which I wanted to make sure that that was shorter and I could show her neckline here. Whenever you're coloring, you want to make sure that you don't color these shorter pieces, because short hair is strong hair, and what that means is strong hair can't move. So have you guys ever stand behind someone at Walmart? Because that's where they are. And and they have those little spots in the back of the head. That's because, well, probably their stylist most likely is pulling through the cap, let's be honest.
And she works at Walmart.
And she works at Walmart. Maybe Supercuts, no offense. But what happens is they start bringing the color into the hair that doesn't naturally move, and it just ends up being spotted through the back. So I could have, if I wanted to, and I did think about maybe putting a couple of slices here where this hair is going to move so it would be fine, it would all blend and together. But I just was like, you know, no, I'm going to keep all my focus towards the front. So I continue my foiling in this pattern, which after this I go into 2 slices of my blue. And on the other side, I do a very similar thing, but since she's got her part on this side, I obviously put a little more color here. And I didn't want to have the color start so high because I wanted the focus to be on this side. So I started my slicing a little lower, and I repeated the same process. So I weaved, I did a yellow, I sliced, I did an orange, and then went right into my magenta. I did 2 of my violet, and then into my blue. I did the exact same thing here, except on this side I only did this pattern. I didn't need this because there wasn't as much hair. So I went down through here, which you can see. There's my blue, and then I stopped. I have some base color, and then I went in for my long pieces here, which then I repeated the process. I did yellow into magenta, then I did my violet, and then my blue. So it looks kind of cool. So then when that lays, it all looks like it all just blends together, but then you got these little peaks of color there. Cute, huh?
Love it.
Okay, so I think at this time I'm going to rinse her. I'm going to show you how to blow dry and how we flat iron, and then we'll be done. So we just had her rinsed, so now I'm going to blow dry. And to explain how we blow dry, we use the Denman brush, which I love because it's got a little rubber on it, and then whenever the heat from your blow dryer is actually going to help to create some tension. It's going to help smooth it. And we do what's called the wrapping technique, where we push the hair in different directions. It's going to allow the hair to collapse and be super smooth. So that way, whenever you go to use your flat iron, it should really only be used just strictly for touching up and smoothing the ends, not necessarily straightening up the scalp, because that should have been done in your blow dry. Yes. At this point, you'll just pretend that none of this hurts you. Okay. Now we're going to finish with flat ironing. So whenever you flat iron, it's best to section the hair on a diagonal, because the flattest section on a round surface is on a diagonal. So I'm going to work up the head, working on a diagonal. You always want to make sure that you comb the hair before you run it through. So what I like to tell people is actually push the comb with the flat iron so that all the hair that goes inside is freshly combed and you don't get any dips or tangles in it. So I would continue just working up the head, and